How is it possible that an ancient Byzantine icon, after centuries of hardship and obscurity, has become one of the most recognized and venerated images of the Blessed Virgin Mary in the entire Catholic world? Our Lady of Perpetual Help, with her piercing and compassionate gaze, has crossed borders, cultures, and centuries to take root in the hearts of millions of faithful who turn to her seeking solace and protection. Her story, marked by miracles and providential events, is a living testament to Mary's motherly care for her children and to God's favor for the humble and simple. Chapter 1. The origin of the sacred icon. The story of the venerated icon of Our Lady of Perpetual Help goes back to the dawn of the 13th century, to the lands of the Byzantine Empire, where the sacred art of iconography had reached heights of spirituality and beauty. According to the oldest traditions, it was a devout artist from the island of Crete, moved by special divine inspiration, who painted this sacred image of the Virgin Mary holding the child Jesus, while the archangels Michael and Gabriel showed her the instruments of the future passion. The creation of the icon is set in a particularly turbulent historical context for Eastern Christianity. The Byzantine Empire, a millennial bastion of the Christian faith in the East, was threatened by external invasions and internal tensions. Theological controversies between the Church of Rome and the Church of Constantinople had led to the painful Great Schism, dividing the Christian world. In this climate of political and religious uncertainty, devotion to the Mother of God, recognized as Mother of God by both traditions, was a strong bond of unity among the divided Christians. The technique used in the creation of the icon faithfully followed the canons of Byzantine iconography. Painted on cedar wood, with natural pigments mixed with hot wax, using the encaustic technique, the icon was not intended to be a mere portrait of Mary and Jesus, but a window into the divine, a means for spiritual contemplation. Each color, each gesture, each detail of the composition obeyed a centuries-old tradition and conveyed a profound theological message, understandable to the faithful, even to those who could not read. From its earliest days, the icon began to be venerated for its unique beauty, and for the atmosphere of solemn tenderness that emanated from the image of the mother with her son. Mary's large and expressive eyes, looking directly at the faithful, her small and serious mouth, her hands gently holding the child, but also seeming to offer him to the world. Everything in the image invited confident prayer and meditation on the mysteries of the Incarnation and redemption. Very soon, the icon's fame transcended the limits of Crete, attracting numerous pilgrims who came to venerate it and to implore the Virgin's intercession. Testimonials of graces received and miracles worked began to multiply, consolidating popular devotion to this image, which was already known as "She Who Always Helps." This growing popular veneration would mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey that would take the icon from the shores of the Eastern Mediterranean to the very heart of Western Christendom. Chapter 2. The Journey to Rome. At the end of the 15th century, when the Ottoman power threatened to spread throughout the Eastern Mediterranean, a devout Cretan merchant, whose name history has not preserved, decided to safeguard the precious icon by moving it to safer lands. Aware of the spiritual value of the image and fearing that it might be destroyed by the Muslim invaders who were not tolerant of Christian religious representations, the merchant undertook a long sea voyage, carrying the sacred icon with him, determined to bring it to safety, to a place where it could continue to be venerated. The journey was marked by extraordinary events that would later be interpreted as signs of divine providence. According to ancient chronicles, during the voyage, a terrible storm broke out, threatening to sink the ship. In the midst of general despair, the merchant took the icon from its protective wrapping and raised it towards the stormy sky, imploring the Virgin's protection. Immediately, the waters calmed and the winds subsided, allowing the ship to continue its voyage without incident. This miracle deeply impressed the crew, who attributed their salvation to the intercession of the Mother of God, represented in that image. After numerous adventures, the merchant finally arrived in Rome around the year 1480. The Eternal City was then experiencing the splendors of the Renaissance under the pontificate of Sixtus IV, the Pope who had commissioned the building of the Sistine Chapel. The humble merchant, fulfilling a promise made during the storm, decided that the icon should be displayed in a Roman church for public veneration. After much prayer, he chose the small church of St. Matthew the Apostle, located on the Via Merulana, between the basilicas of St. Mary Major and St. John Lateran. The arrival of the icon at the Church of St. Matthew was received with great enthusiasm by the Augustinian friars who ran it and by the faithful of the neighborhood. Soon, news of the presence of this extraordinary Byzantine image and the miracles attributed to it during its voyage spread throughout Rome. The church began to be visited by numerous devotees who came to implore the protection of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, the name by which the image began to be known, a translation of the Greek title it already bore in the East. For the next 3 centuries, the icon remained in the Church of St. Matthew, becoming one of the most venerated in Rome. Numerous testimonies from the period speak of the graces obtained through the intercession of Our Lady of Perpetual Help and of the multitude of votive offerings that adorned the walls of the temple. Silent witnesses to the gratitude of the faithful. Devotion transcended the city's borders and began to spread to other regions of Italy. However, the vicissitudes of history were about to plunge the sacred icon into a long period of darkness and oblivion. Chapter 3: The Centuries of Obscurity. The tumultuous times that shook Europe at the end of the 18th century profoundly affected the Catholic Church and, with it, the fate of the venerated icon. In 1798, the troops of Napoleon Bonaparte invaded the Papal States and occupied Rome. Within the framework of the anti-clerical policies of the French revolutionary government, numerous churches were closed, expropriated, or used for profane purposes. The Church of St. Matthew the Apostle was among those slated for demolition as part of a new urban development plan for the city. Facing the imminent destruction of the temple, the Augustinian friars, custodians of the icon for over 3 centuries, decided to safeguard it, taking it with them as they left the convent. The superior of the community, aware of the image's spiritual and historical value, entrusted this mission to Brother Augustin Orsetti, one of the oldest and most devout friars of the Virgin. The venerable friar hid the icon among his meager belongings and moved it to the small church of Santa Maria in Posterula, where the Augustinian community found temporary refuge. During the turbulent years that followed, as Europe was shaken by the Napoleonic Wars and their aftermath, the exact whereabouts of the icon remained somewhat obscure. Some documents suggest that, after several moves, the sacred image was entrusted to the private custody of a Roman family linked to the Augustinians, while others indicate it remained in a smaller chapel of another church in the city, far from public veneration. Be that as it may, for over half a century, the icon that had been the object of so much devotion fell into virtual oblivion. Brother Orsetti, however, did not forget the spiritual treasure he had saved from destruction. Now elderly, and sensing his imminent departure from this world, he confided the secret of the icon's location to a young acolyte named Michel Marchi. "Remember, my son," he said, his voice trembling with emotion and age, "that the ancient image of Our Lady of St. Matthew, known as Our Lady of Perpetual Help, is now in the private chapel of the Augustinian brothers. do everything possible to ensure that this sacred image once again receives public veneration. For the Blessed Virgin wishes to be honored in it, among the basilicas of St. Mary Major and St. John Lateran, as it was for so many centuries. These words of the elderly friar, spoken around 1850, would remain etched in the memory of young Marchi, who years later, as a Redemptorist priest, would play a providential role in the rediscovery of the icon and in the revival of its devotion. Meanwhile, the sacred image patiently awaited the moment appointed by divine providence to once again fulfill its mission of being a channel of grace and comfort for the faithful, thus confirming its title of perpetual help for all who come to it with filial trust. Chapter 4. The Providential Rediscovery. In February 1855, the Congregation of the Most Holy Redeemer, founded by Saint Alphonsus Liguori, acquired some land on the Via Merulana in Rome to establish its general house. On that site, which included the remains of the old church of St. Matthew, the Redemptorists began the construction of a new temple dedicated to their founder, St. Alphonsus. During the works, Father Michel Marchi, who, as we have seen, had received the confidence of Brother Orsetti in his youth, remembered the story of the famous icon that had once been venerated in that very place. Father Marchi shared this memory with the Superior General of the Redemptorists, Father Nicholas Moron, who immediately became interested in the possibility of recovering such a precious relic for the new church. Both religious men began a meticulous investigation to locate the icon's whereabouts. After numerous searches in ecclesiastical archives and after interviewing former members of the Augustinian community, they discovered that the sacred image was indeed in the private chapel of the convent of Santa Maria in Posterula, guarded by the Irish Augustinian fathers. The discovery was a cause for great joy for the Redemptorists, who saw in this providential coincidence a clear sign of God's will. Not only had they established their general house in the very place where the icon had been venerated for centuries, but also the devotion to the Virgin Mary occupied a central place in Alphonsine spirituality. St. Alphonsus, founder of the congregation, had been a fervent promoter of Marian devotion and had written one of the most influential works on this topic, The Glories of Mary. Aware of the historical and spiritual importance of the discovery, Father Moron decided to directly request permission from Pope Pius IX to move the icon to the new church of St. Alphonsus, thus fulfilling the ancient prophecy of Brother Orsetti about the image's return to its original place. Between the basilicas of St. Mary Major and St. John Lateran, on December 11, 1865, the pontiff received the Superior General of the Redemptorists in audience and listened with interest to the story of the icon and the congregation's wishes. Pius IX, deeply devoted to the Virgin Mary, and who years earlier had proclaimed the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, was moved by the account. After meditating briefly, he took a piece of paper and wrote in his own hand an order addressed to the Prior General of the Augustinians. December 11th, 1865. The Cardinal Prefect of Propaganda Fide will call upon the Superior of the community of Santa Maria in Posterula and tell him that it is our will that the image of the Blessed Virgin, which is the subject of this plea, be returned to the church situated between the basilicas of St. John and St. Mary Major. In compensation, I will give the Augustinian Fathers another beautiful copy of the same. With this decisive gesture, the Pope not only authorized the transfer of the icon, but also became a direct promoter of the revival of one of the oldest and most significant Marian devotions in Rome. Chapter 5. The Restoration and Enthronement. Once papal authorization was obtained, the Redemptorists enthusiastically began preparations to receive the sacred icon worthily in its new home. The first task was the restoration of the image, which after so many years of vicissitudes showed clear signs of deterioration. For this delicate task, the Polish painter Leopold Nowotny, professor at the Pontifical Academy and a renowned expert in Byzantine sacred art, was chosen. With utmost care and respect for the work's original integrity, Nowotny cleaned the surface of the icon, consolidated the areas where the paint was beginning to peel, and restored some details that had been lost over time. During the restoration process, fascinating aspects of the icon's technique and history were discovered. It was confirmed that it had been painted on cedar wood, following the Byzantine iconographic tradition, and that over the centuries it had received at least 2 previous restorations. Inscriptions in Greek were also found on the back of the panel, though partially erased. They seem to confirm the icon's Cretan origin and its approximate dating to the 13th century. These findings further increase the historical and artistic value of the piece, in addition to its already recognized spiritual significance. While the restoration was completed, the Redemptorists undertook an intense campaign to publicize the icon's history and to spiritually prepare the faithful for its solemn enthronement. Father Michael Marchi, a providential witness to the rediscovery, wrote a booklet titled Historical Memory on the Ancient and Prodigious Image of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, which was widely distributed in Rome and other Italian cities. Novenas were also organized. Special sermons were given, and various religious congregations and lay associations were invited to participate in the scheduled celebrations. April 26, 1866, the feast day of Saints Cletus and Marcellinus, was the date chosen for the solemn procession and enthronement of the icon. The day before, the sacred image was transferred from the restoration workshop to the Church of St. Alphonsus in a simple private ceremony, being received by the Redemptorist community with prayers, hymns, and deep emotion. Throughout the night, groups of religious and faithful took turns watching over the icon, spiritually preparing for the great event of the following day. The morning of April 26th dawned radiant in Rome. From the early hours of the morning, a multitude of faithful began to gather around the Church of St. Alphonsus. At 5 in the afternoon, the icon was placed on a richly adorned platform with flowers and lights, and the solemn procession that would travel the Via Merulana began. The procession, headed by a processional cross and followed by children dressed in white, religious of various orders, the secular clergy, members of confraternities with their banners, and a large crowd of faithful, advanced slowly amidst hymns and prayers. Upon returning to the church, Cardinal Constantine Patrizzi, Vicar of Rome, solemnly enthroned the icon on the high altar specially prepared to receive it. Thus, after almost 70 years of concealment, the venerated image of Our Lady of Perpetual Help once again occupied a place of honor in the very place where it had been venerated for centuries, fulfilling the ancient prophecy of Brother Orsetti and beginning a new and glorious chapter in the history of this Marian devotion. Chapter 6. The Icon's Symbolism. The icon of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, like all works of Byzantine iconography, is not a simple artistic representation, but a complex theological language expressed through images. Every element, every color, every gesture has a specific meaning, which together constitutes a profound visual catechesis on the mysteries of the Christian faith. To fully appreciate its spiritual value, it is necessary to decipher this rich symbolism, which Byzantine faithful understood intuitively, but which may be less evident to contemporary Western Christians. At the center of the composition is the majestic figure of the Virgin Mary, depicted from the waist up, holding the child Jesus with her left arm while pointing towards him with her right hand. This gesture, known in Byzantine iconography as hodigitria, she who shows the way, clearly indicates that Mary does not seek to draw attention to herself. but to lead the faithful to her Son, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Her large almond-shaped eyes look directly at the viewer, establishing an intimate and personal communication that invites prayer and contemplation. Her face, with a serious and serene expression, reflects both the dignity of the Mother of God and the compassion of the Mother of all believers. The child Jesus is depicted not as a helpless infant, but as the eternal Word incarnate, conscious of his redemptive mission. His face, with adult features despite his small body, expresses divine wisdom. He wears a green tunic, a symbol of life and regeneration, covered by a dark red cloak that represents royalty and prefigures the Passion. In his left hand, he holds a scroll symbolizing the Scriptures, while with his right, he clings to his mother's hand, seeking comfort in the face of the instruments of his future passion. This moving detail humanizes the divine figure of the Savior, showing him subject to the human emotions of fear and the need for maternal comfort. On either side of the Virgin and Child are two angelic figures. To the viewer's left, the Archangel Michael, holding the lance, the reed with the sponge, and the cup of gall and vinegar. To the right, the Archangel Gabriel, carrying the cross and the nails. These instruments of the Passion shown to the child Jesus explain the expression of fear on his face and the gesture of seeking refuge in his mother, even letting one of his sandals fall. The presence of these elements introduces a temporal dimension into the icon that unites the mystery of the Incarnation with that of the redemption, showing that from his infancy, Christ was fully aware of the suffering that awaited him for the salvation of humanity. The colors used in the icon also possess a profound symbolism. The gold background, characteristic of Byzantine iconography, represents the divine light, eternity, and heavenly glory. The Virgin's cloak, dark blue, symbolizes her humanity and, at the same time, her status as the first among creatures. The eight-pointed star on her forehead identifies her as the Star of the Sea, a sure guide for sailors on the stormy sea of life. The red color of her inner tunic signifies the divine love that burns in her heart, while the golden edges of her garments indicate that, although human, Mary is transfigured by divine grace. The Greek letters appearing in the icon complete its theological message, MPThy, abbreviation of Meta Theou, Mother of God. Next to Mary's head, ICXC, Jesus Christos, Jesus Christ. Next to the child's, and OAM, Saint Michael, and OGA, Saint Gabriel, next to the respective archangels. Chapter 7. The worldwide spread of devotion. From the very moment of the icon's solemn enthronement in the Church of St. Alphonsus, the Redemptorists enthusiastically embraced the mission of spreading devotion to Our Lady of Perpetual Help throughout the world. Father Nicholas Moron, the Superior General, recognized the spiritual treasure entrusted to his congregation. He established a systematic strategy to spread the icon's message to every country where the sons of St. Alphonsus served. The first step, the creation of an arch-confraternity of Our Lady of Perpetual Help and St. Alphonsus. Canonically erected by Pope Pius IX on May 23, 1871, this association of the faithful, which soon boasted millions of members worldwide, had a primary goal to honor the Virgin under this title through specific devotional practices like the Perpetual Novena and acts of charity. Members pledged to imitate Mary's virtues, especially her readiness to help those in need and to spread her devotion. The Arch-Confraternity quickly became a powerful instrument for the international spread of this devotion. Simultaneously, the Redemptorists began producing faithful reproductions of the icon, created by skilled artists and blessed by contact with the original. These copies, accompanied by explanatory pamphlets in various languages, were sent to all the congregation's houses, and through them, to countless parishes, shrines, and Christian homes across 5 continents. The icon's beauty, its rich symbolism, and the message of comfort and hope it conveyed were enthusiastically received by the faithful from the most diverse cultures and social backgrounds. Popular missions, a hallmark of the Redemptorist ministry, became another privileged vehicle for spreading devotion. Missionaries systematically included references to Our Lady of Perpetual Help in their sermons, explaining the icon's meaning, relating stories of graces received through her intercession, and establishing the practice of the Perpetual Novena in the parishes where they preached. This form of devotion, a weekly religious service including prayers, hymns, biblical readings, and a short homily focused on Mary, achieved extraordinary popularity, particularly in countries like the United States, the Philippines, Brazil, and Ireland. By the end of the 19th century, the devotion had taken such firm root that shrines dedicated to Our Lady of Perpetual Help began to spring up in numerous countries. In Boston, United States, Singapore, Manila, Philippines, Dublin, Ireland, Curitiba, Brazil, Tequisquiapan, Mexico, and many other cities, temples were erected, becoming pilgrimage centers and radiating this Marian spirituality. In each of these places, the image of perpetual help was naturally enculturated, taking on characteristics specific to local traditions and sensibilities, while always maintaining its essence and universal message. The 20th century witnessed an even greater expansion of the devotion, aided by new media, and the Second Vatican Council's impetus for renewed Marian piety. Periodicals, radio and television programs, and more recently the internet and social media have helped spread knowledge and love of Our Lady of Perpetual Help among new generations of the faithful. Today, more than 150 years after its rediscovery, the revered image continues to fulfill its mission as a channel of grace and comfort for millions of people worldwide, confirming the perpetuity of her maternal help. Chapter 8. Attributed Miracles. The history of devotion to Our Lady of Perpetual Help is punctuated by countless testimonies of graces and miracles attributed to her powerful intercession. From the early days of her veneration in the ancient Church of St. Matthew to the present day, thousands of the faithful have experienced extraordinary answers to their prayers, manifesting the Mother of God's special predilection for helping her children in their diverse needs. These wonders, many meticulously documented, have powerfully contributed to the spread and consolidation of this Marian devotion throughout the world. Among the oldest miracles associated with the icon is one that occurred during its journey from Crete to Rome in the 15th century. According to chronicles, a terrible storm threatened to sink the vessel carrying the sacred image. When the devout merchant who had saved it from destruction raised the icon toward the stormy sky, imploring Mary's protection, the waters instantly calmed, and the ship was able to continue its voyage without incident. This miracle, reminiscent of the gospel account of Jesus calming the storm, would be the first in a long series of supernatural interventions, confirming the title of Perpetual Help given to the Virgin depicted in this icon. In the 19th century, shortly after the icon's solemn enthronement in the Church of St. Alphonsus, an extraordinary event occurred that moved the city of Rome and decisively contributed to the rapid spread of devotion. A 5-year-old girl named Rosa Mercurio, suffering from a serious illness considered incurable by doctors, was brought by her desperate mother before the newly restored image. After a fervent prayer, the little girl, unable to walk because of her illness, suddenly rose, exclaiming that she saw the Virgin smiling at her from the icon. To the astonishment of those present, the child began to walk normally, completely cured of her illness. This miracle, rigorously documented by ecclesiastical authorities, was the first of a series of extraordinary healings that soon began to occur before the icon. Throughout the 20th century, testimonies of miraculous interventions attributed to Our Lady of Perpetual Help multiplied throughout the world, especially in the shrines dedicated to this title. In Manila, Philippines, during World War II, the Church of Baclaran, where a blessed copy of the icon is venerated, remained miraculously untouched amidst the devastating bombings that destroyed surrounding buildings. Thousands of Filipinos found refuge in the temple during those terrible days, and none of them suffered any harm, despite bombs falling all around. This event, considered miraculous by the local population, definitively consolidated the devotion to Our Lady of Perpetual Help in the Asian archipelago, making it one of the country's most popular Marian devotions. In Latin America, a region where devotion has taken deep root, countless testimonies speak of favors received through the intercession of Our Lady of Perpetual Help. One particularly remarkable event occurred in Curitiba, Brazil in 1964. A terrible fire threatened to completely destroy an orphanage run by nuns, housing over 100 children. As the flames were about to engulf the dormitories, one of the sisters placed an image of Our Lady of Perpetual Help before the fire, imploring her protection. Inexplicably, the flames receded, and the fire was extinguished before the firefighters arrived, without causing any casualties. Subsequent investigations could not determine any natural causes for this sudden cessation of the fire, which was attributed to the supernatural intervention of Mary. Not all miracles attributed to Our Lady of Perpetual Help are spectacular or public. Thousands of the faithful worldwide testify to graces received in private and family settings, inexplicable recoveries from illnesses, unexpected solutions to financial problems, seemingly impossible family reconciliations, spiritual conversions, protection in dangerous situations, and many other blessings. While not necessarily extraordinary events to an outside observer, these are experienced by those who receive them as authentic miracles of divine mercy, obtained through Mary's maternal intercession. Chapter 9. The principal shrines among the numerous temples dedicated to Our Lady of Perpetual Help scattered throughout the world. Some have become important pilgrimage centers, where devotion to the Virgin under this title is experienced with particular intensity. These shrines, true beacons of Marian spirituality, attract millions of the faithful annually, who come to honor the Mother of God and implore her perpetual help in their diverse needs. The first and most important of these shrines is undoubtedly the Church of St. Alphonsus in Rome, where the original icon rediscovered in the 19th century is venerated, located on the Via Merulana, between the basilicas of St. John Lateran and St. Mary Major. This church is the worldwide center of devotion, and the point from which it has radiated to all 5 continents. Run by the Redemptorist Fathers, the official custodians of the icon by papal designation. The church receives hundreds of pilgrims from all nationalities daily. Every Wednesday, the famous Perpetual Novena is celebrated there, a religious service that includes specific prayers, hymns, Bible readings, and a short homily, followed by a blessing with a relic in contact with the icon. The faithful place their written petitions in special urns before the image, trusting in the intercession of she who has never ignored the pleas of her children. In the Americas, the National Shrine of Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Boston, Massachusetts, is the main center of this devotion in the United States, founded in 1871 by the Redemptorists, a few years after the enthronement of the icon in Rome. This shrine has witnessed countless graces and conversions. The practice of the Perpetual Novena, introduced there in 1922, became so popular that for decades up to 10 services were held each Tuesday, with the church completely full at each one. Although social and religious changes have modified some of these devotional practices, the shrine remains an important spiritual center where thousands of American faithful come to venerate Our Lady of Perpetual Help and seek her intercession. In Asia, the National Shrine of Our Lady of Perpetual Help of Baclaran in Manila, Philippines, is probably the most frequented center of this devotion in the world. Built in 1958, and later expanded to accommodate the multitudes of devotees, this impressive temple receives over 100,000 faithful every Wednesday, the day traditionally dedicated to the Perpetual Novena. Distributed among numerous celebrations throughout the day, the devotion of Filipinos to Our Lady of Perpetual Help, deeply rooted in the national culture, is manifested in sometimes moving expressions of piety. Many pilgrims traverse the long central nave of the sanctuary on their knees. Others remain for hours in prayer before the venerated image, and numerous votive offerings testify to the graces received through her intercession. In Latin America, where Marian devotion is an essential part of the cultural and religious identity, numerous shrines are dedicated to Our Lady of Perpetual Help. Among these, the National Shrine of Tequisquiapan in Mexico stands out, receiving more than 1 million pilgrims annually. The image venerated there, a copy of the original icon specially blessed in Rome, was canonically crowned in 1995 in a ceremony that gathered more than 50,000 faithful. The pilgrimage is organized from all regions of the country, especially during the novena leading up to the feast day on June 27th, constitute an impressive manifestation of popular faith and devotion. Shrines in Curitiba, Brazil, Santiago, Chile, and Buenos Aires, Argentina, hold similar importance, each with its own characteristics that reflect the inculturation of this Marian devotion in the different Latin American realities. In Europe, besides the Roman shrine already mentioned, the Shrine of Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Belfast, Northern Ireland, deserves special attention. During the difficult years of the Northern Irish conflict, it became a space of reconciliation and prayer for peace. And the Shrine of Limerick, in the Republic of Ireland, where devotion has taken deep root among the Catholic population, giving rise to numerous religious and priestly vocations. Chapter 10. Feasts and Traditions. Devotion to Our Lady of Perpetual Help has generated over the centuries a rich heritage of traditions, celebrations, and pious practices that, adapting to different cultures and sensibilities, express the love and trust of the faithful in the Mother of God under this title. These popular religious manifestations, some universal in scope and others specific to certain regions, constitute a valuable spiritual treasure that enriches the life of the Church and strengthens the faith of millions of believers worldwide. The most important liturgical celebration honoring Our Lady of Perpetual Help is her feast day, celebrated on June 27th. This date commemorates the solemn canonical coronation of the original icon, a coronation that took place in St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican in 1867. By order of Pope Pius IX. In sanctuaries and parishes dedicated to this invocation, the feast is celebrated with exceptional solemnity, generally preceded by a novena of preparation, a time for reflection on various aspects of Mary's spiritual motherhood and her role in the history of salvation. On the feast day itself, celebrations include solemn masses, processions with the image, floral offerings, concerts of sacred music, and diverse cultural and charitable activities. These activities vary according to local traditions. The most widespread and characteristic devotional practice of this invocation is, without a doubt, the Perpetual Novena, traditionally celebrated on Wednesdays in honor of Our Lady of Perpetual Help. This devotion, begun in the Church of St. Alphonsus in Rome and later spread throughout the world by the Redemptorists, consists of a weekly religious service. It includes specific prayers, hymns, biblical readings, a short homily, and a blessing with a relic of the original icon or a blessed copy thereof. The choice of Wednesday for this practice stems from the traditional belief that it was the day Judas Iscariot plotted the betrayal of Jesus. Therefore, Mary's protection against spiritual temptations and dangers is especially invoked. A particularly moving tradition associated with the Perpetual Novena is that of the letters to the Virgin. The faithful write their petitions, thanks, or intentions on paper. These are then deposited in special urns placed before the image of Our Lady of Perpetual Help. These letters, reflecting the concerns, hopes, and gratitude of the devotees, are symbolically presented to the Virgin during the celebration. Afterwards, they are either incinerated or archived, according to the customs of each sanctuary. In some places, selected testimonials of graces received are read publicly during the novena. This serves to strengthen the faith and hope of the participants. In the Philippines, where the devotion has taken deep root, a very popular tradition is the pahalik, kiss. This involves approaching the image of Our Lady of Perpetual Help to reverently kiss it, or to touch it with a handkerchief or other object. This object is then kept as a relic of contact. This practice, expressing the closeness and familiarity with which Filipinos live their relationship with Mary, attracts thousands of faithful who form long lines, especially on Wednesdays and during Marian feasts. They seek this intimate moment of encounter with the Mother of God. In Mexico and other Latin American countries, a deeply rooted tradition is that of the Pilgrims of Perpetual Help, groups of the faithful who travel on foot, by bicycle, or other means of transportation. Long distances to the sanctuaries dedicated to this invocation, especially for the feast of June 27th. These pilgrims, often fulfilling promises made to the Virgin for favors received, usually carry banners, images, and emblems that identify them as devotees of perpetual help. These pilgrimages, which can last several days, include prayers, hymns, and community celebrations. These strengthen the bonds of faith and brotherhood among the participants. Chapter 11. Prayer to Our Lady of Perpetual Help. O Most Holy Virgin Mary, under the invocation of perpetual help, you have desired to be for all your children an inexhaustible source of grace and consolation. Turn your merciful eyes towards me and contemplate the needs that weigh upon my heart. You, who hold in your arms the divine child, who is eternal wisdom and infinite love, do not disdain my humble supplications, nor allow my trust in your maternal protection to be disappointed. Mother of Perpetual Help, in times of tribulation and anguish, when difficulties seem insurmountable and discouragement threatens to invade my soul, make me feel the sweet efficacy of your perpetual help. You, who understand all sorrows because you have been the mother of sorrows, teach me to find in the cross of your Son the strength to persevere on the path of good, as you remained steadfast beside Calvary when all seemed lost. In the temptations and dangers that threaten my spiritual life, be my refuge and protection. Just as in the sacred icon, we see the child Jesus seeking comfort in your arms before the sight of the instruments of his passion. Allow me to find in your maternal lap protection against the snares of the enemy, and courage to face the trials that divine providence may send me for my sanctification. May your serene and compassionate gaze always guide me towards your Son, the only way, truth, and life for our souls. In my temporal needs, health of body, family matters, economic problems, or work difficulties, manifest yourself also as my perpetual help. I do not ask you, Blessed Mother, to free me from every cross, for I know that suffering is part of the path that leads to heaven, but that you grant me the grace to bear my crosses with love and patience, seeing in them not a punishment, but an invitation to conform myself more perfectly to Christ crucified. And if it is God's will and is beneficial for my salvation, grant me the particular grace that I now ask. You with humble confidence mention your request here. Above all, Mother of perpetual help, obtain for me the grace of graces, the invaluable gift of final perseverance, that at the end of my earthly pilgrimage, after having honored and invoked you throughout my life, I may, through your powerful intercession, be united to you in the heavenly homeland, to eternally contemplate the glorious face of your Son, Jesus Christ, and to sing forever the mercies of the Lord and your maternal kindnesses. Mother of perpetual help, pray for us, that we may be worthy to obtain the promises of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.